All right, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Professor Chuck YouTube channel with my guest today, Chris.
Yes.
Welcome, Chris. And today's topic, we are going to tackle the concept of group think and how it applies to the business place.
All right, let's get started. So let's start off with what is our, for the purposes of this show, doesn't mean textbook or anything like that, but what's our working definition of what groupthink is?
So groupthink, for me, it's reminiscent of mob mentality. There's elements of it, and I like to use the example of the Romans you've got the Colosseum, you've got warriors fighting, and one of them is on the brink of deciding should that warrior live or die, and the mob, the group, the audience, they're the ones who decide, and you know, that thumbs up or thumbs down, kind of classic, you see it in the movies, right? That piece of it, you have common citizens deciding if someone should live or die. And while outside of that Colosseum environment, they may never consider killing someone, that while they're there in that moment with that crowd, groupthink might take over and they're looking at everyone else and they might go the way that the folks around them are. That it somehow justifies actions and behaviors based on the fact that the group is thinking a certain way.
And does this really apply more to the office settings, not really live or die, right? In the office setting.
You're not killing people, hopefully, in the workplace. But yeah, there's application there. Where would you like to go with that?
So, I mean, it's always this idea that there is this general circumstance of what the group wants to think, and especially when it comes to outside thoughts, outside processes, outside whatever it is, that the group has to decide whether that thought lives or dies.
I think that's important to differentiate here. I don't think it's a bad thing for a group to decide something.
Right. It's
when individuals start to suppress their own individual viewpoints in favor of the group. Like somehow that takes over their individuality. There's a saying that goes along with this. It's go along to get along. So go along with the crowd, go along with the group in order to get along with everyone. And here what we're doing is there's that potential for basically killing diversity of thought. Right? Diversity is a beautiful, wonderful thing that leads to conflict. Conflict is a beautiful, wonderful thing that can lead to better ideas. But along the way, with diversity and conflict, there's that potential, if you don't have good communication, that things can explode. Right? People can get hurt, they're mad at each other, and it can be negative, non-constructive conflict.
Right. And I see that the avoidance of conflict rather than this understanding, this critiquing of a professional stance of what conflicts can be, because it can blossom into some new ideas that have never been discovered by this office, by this warehouse, by this wherever, and that particular conflict could have led to something that is brand new to the workplace.
Yeah, I do an exercise in the classroom and in the workplace, right, when I'm teaching and consulting, where it's a survival game. And what you do is everyone has this prioritization list. One of the versions of it is you're on the moon and you've been separated from your base and you have these 10 items. And to survive and move for the 20 miles from where you're at to the other place, what's the prioritization of these 10 items? So you get the group together and they decide as a group, and they have to decide even how they're going to decide. Democracy is one of those ones. Let's vote, right? Okay. Sometimes it's the person who is the most passionate, the loudest. They're the ones who we're going to listen to. But what I find out very often is sometimes in that group of, say, 10 people, one person has the right answer. They've got the best methodology to solve this problem, in this case, to move 20 miles from point A to point B on the moon. They've got the best answer themselves as an individual, because I have them all take it individually first, and then I have them as a group decide things. And sometimes that person who had the highest score, the best answer, the group actually has a lesser score than they do, because they're not listening to all the individuals. They're not actively pulling information from the folks who might have the right answers.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think going back to groupthink then is that suppression of those individuals who might have the right answers, even if it's different than everyone else, right? If everyone else is wrong and only one person is right. In that case, democracy isn't going to work, right? Everybody voting.
Yep.
It's how do you pull those ideas out and avoid groupthink? Because groupthink is, well, 9 people are going along with law. 9 people, I might as well go along with it. But what if it's life and death?
Right.
What if it's profitability? What if it's some big decision? You want to pull those answers in, right?
Just because they're the loudest doesn't mean that they're right.
Right, and loudest, that's one way to say it. And I said that earlier. Charismatic, that's another way, right? What if the person has credentials, right?
Right.
Like I've seen this is fun. I used to do it at a particular school that had a lot of military folks. And so a survival thing with military folks who got training. I had one group where there was one military person, 20 years in, I think they were Army, right? And then the others were civilians. Well, the civilians were like, well, I've never had to go through a survival training course, so this military guy, he must know all the right answers. But here's the deal, you don't train on the moon in the military, except maybe now in Space Force. Space Force, they might be training for the moon with their camouflage uniforms.
I saw that the other day, yes.
Sorry, we're getting sidetracked here. But the whole point is there is an inherent need, I think, in organizations to kind of take groupthink out of the picture and have a period of time where you're actively pulling information from all of your players. Eventually, you're going to have to decide on a course of action. Right? You can't just always be different, always have variation. There's a period of time, I think, where you have it's the right time to bring in all the ideas, and eventually you have to make a decision and set a course of action. And yes, the people who disagreed, they're going to have to get on board and go forward. But if you start off and you miss that opportunity to pull that information in at the beginning, you could be missing out on some great ideas.
So I guess ways to really combat the negative side of groupthink is more like the anonymous boxes, right? Where you get ideas from people without any means of saying, that you don't write your name on it, right? You don't attribute it yourself to, and make it a little bit more individualistic. That way you can hear the ideas that are coming from it.
I wish I could agree with you. In concept, in theory, in a classroom setting, I would absolutely agree with you that those suggestion boxes, that's a good thing, right? It's anonymous. You get everybody to participate. In practice, though, unfortunately, 20 years plus out in the field, I've seen suggestion boxes started, and then within a couple months, they're just collecting dust. Or the suggestions are triple our pay, or we only want to work 1 hour a week, and it gets so ridiculous that the company that wants to do right and address everyone that comes in, there's a stumbling block that happens there. And I don't want to squash it, completely, because I think there's a point there that it just makes sense that you want to pull people, give everybody the opportunity to participate. But on the flip side is if you are in an environment where people feel they have to be anonymous to bring forward ideas, I think that may be what you need to work on first. Right? If you have a culture that actively shoots down and suppresses ideas, or people don't feel comfortable bringing things forward for whatever reason, dude, you gotta work on that. You gotta make people feel comfortable to be able to bring out those ideas. And even realize that just because you had the idea doesn't mean we're gonna implement every single one, but we're gonna listen, right? We're gonna consider it, and we're gonna try where it makes sense to maybe potentially implement those types of things.
Now on that's combating negative aspects of it, and really we were talking about the negative aspects of groupthink. What are some positive aspects to groupthink that we really haven't really touched on, especially in like business classes? Me myself, having gone through that, all I really heard for the most part was negative. Combat groupthink, it's bad to have groupthink. What are some positive things?
Yeah, I don't really know that in its purest definition, kind of what we've established, that there is any really true good aspects of groupthink.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really true. But in our conversation right now, kind of the timing piece of it, there is a time and a place where you want to put forward all the ideas, have the conflict, beat things up, but then a decision gets made on a course of action.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I don't think it's considered groupthink at that point, but you got to go in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, everybody's moving every different way and it's chaos all the time. It's a time and a place, if that makes sense. But again, I don't think at the time of implementation of an idea, I don't think that if you're still against it, but you're going along because you have to, but you voiced your opinion earlier. I truly don't think we're in a groupthink situation anymore. I think it's evolved past that at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's like a split vote, 51-49 vote, and the 51, obviously they won, let's say in a democratic office, democratic society,
right.
That the group would need to...
Those 49 people are going to
yes.
have to get on board with the action because
yes.
they were outvoted, right?
Yes.
Or 98-2, those two people,
mm-hmm.
they're going to have to get on board and go forward with it, because if they're actively fighting against it still, right, even after a decision has been made, then there's that potential for negative conflict, mm-hmm. right? They not helping things go forward. So again, time and place. As an idea comes forward and we want to measure it and we want to beat it up from different directions, that's the time where groupthink is kill it, get rid of it. You don't want that. You want everybody to be able to kind of voice their opinion and kind of hear what the team has to offer. Later on, once a decision's made, then we need to be a team and implement and go forward with it. Otherwise, there's potential chaos.
And I see, from what I've read and, what I've even seen in real life, is what groupthink, another thing that we haven't touched on here, is the inability or inaction of people as well. For instance, there was a case back in the 70s in New York where there was a woman who was getting beat up in the middle of the street, and she's calling out for help.
Okay.
And it just so happened that 32 people were looking down, watching her get beat up to the point where she died. Now, the funny thing is this made the fourth page of the newspaper. It wasn't even big news. Well, the mayor just happened to be talking about a different case, and he mixed up between that case and a different case, and he started talking about accidentally that case. Well, that became front page news. And then researchers started going, wait, 30 people were watching, this one person get beat up to the point of death?
And now people are starting to really understand the implications.
The implications of it. And so social scientists had to break this down, going, why was there inaction? What prevented people from moving, from helping this person? And
it was potentially a group think type thing. Whereas I'm not seeing anybody else move to go help, so then that must justify my inaction at this point, right? That's what the group's thinking, so it's inappropriate for me to move forward to help. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. And plenty of examples of people who fight that and don't go into groupthink and would come save the day, right? To be there for that individual. But it's an interesting perspective that groupthink not only leading to action to a certain degree, but potentially inaction as well. Talk about the Romans, the action of deciding on if someone should live or die, and in this case, life or death as well.
Right.
Through inaction, by not helping, and if you talk to each one of those individuals, they would probably respect life. They would probably, logically go through it, but in the moment, groupthink can take over too.
Now, social scientists have broken that particular case down and found a way to combat, especially inaction, and especially leaders like top-down management, is giving clear directions to a specific person.
Clear directions to a specific person. So let's say we're in that situation. You are getting beat up. Boom, 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 boom. And it's almost to the point that, and I'm rushing in as an individual where there's lots of people around. I'm rushing in to help, but my own ability to help you isn't going to be enough. I need other people to help. And to try to break that group think, I can't just simply say, hey guys, help me out. What are the social
It would
scientists?
be pointing at someone like, for instance, hey, you in the blue shirt over there.
Hey you, we're pointing to you now, right? Come help.
Yes.
And so that's specific direction
Mm-hmm.
to an individual that can help break the group think.
Funny enough with that, one of the social scientists that I did read about, because he's a social scientist, he knew what to do. He got in a car accident, right? He was bleeding a little bit, and the person in front of him, or the person behind him, sorry, was just incapacitated at that point, and people were still driving, past. So, and he's in an intersection. He's like, you know what? I'm a social scientist. I should know what to do. He points at a few cars, right, and a few of them stop and start helping him out. And then the groupthink reverses, and more people, because action started, it created this trickle effect.
And somehow now this justifies, it's okay. Socially speaking, it's okay to drive past something and keep going because everybody else is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see a few people stopping and helping, oh, I need to stop and help too.
There you go, yes.
Interesting. Again, groupthink. That's when it's directed a certain way, if people are going to behave that way, to direct it towards something positive, that's a way to do that.
Exactly. It's
clear direction.
The snowball effect. You get the ball rolling just a little bit and it creates more going towards that goal.
So the lessons here. So if you have in the workplace
Mm-hmm.
people who just kind of go along, that's something you want to work on over time. And it's going to
Yes.
take a while to change culture. So when I mention culture, this is a big word. I'm just throwing it out there as a simple term, but it is deep. It is hard to change.
It's rooted in people.
It's in your DNA as an organization, as a group, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what culture is. So to change it, hard. Definitely some benefits to changing that type of culture where groupthink is the norm.
Yes.
Right? Where everybody just kind of goes along with the flow and just kind of does things, right? So you want to change that over time, but if you can't change it immediately, to direct it towards something positive, that might be an alternative. And using, like you said, clear, direct instructions to people, that gets a few individuals going a certain way, and then the group will potentially follow positively.
Yes.
So there we have it. We have definitely the negative aspects of it. You want to fight against it to make sure individuals are heard, timing wise, once decisions are made, to move and to work as a team together, which is difficult to transition from chaos and argument to teamwork, but it can happen for sure. And then of course, if you don't have the ability to change that right now, change that whole group thing, is to use that power for good instead of for other things. Yes?
Yes.
Spider-Man, right? Great power comes great responsibility.
Okay, Uncle Ben.
Good talk.
That was a good talk. That was.
All right, folks. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with Chris and with you, of course. And we want to hear from you. If you've got examples of groupthink in your workplace, please share it in the comments down below. Again, we ask you to like, subscribe, and follow us like crazy. Share us with as many people as you think might benefit from these conversations. Again, we want to hear from you. Hear from you with your experiences. Hear from you in terms of how this might apply to your workplace, to your family life, etc. Let us know. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Have a good one.